Hello, I'm John Conrad. On an earlier video, I discussed how you could improve your credit score. In that video, I assumed you didn't have any collections or negative reports on your credit report. In this video, I'm going to discuss what happens if you do. The first thing you need to do is go to creditkarma.com or freecreditreport.com and obtain your credit reports. You can do this, you can just look over your reports and see if you have any negative items. If you do, you're going to have to address it because they're almost certainly negatively impacting your credit score. So from a credit card payment point of view, what's going to show up on your credit report for missed payments is you're going to see the 30-day missed payment, the 60-day missed payment, then 90 days. Then at some period between 90 and 180 days, the credit card companies are going to charge off the amount. Essentially, they're going to say to the world and the credit reporting agencies, we don't expect to get paid, so we're charging this off. What happens to that debt? They'll either put it in collections internally or they'll sell it to a third-party collection agency. But now understand that on your credit report, it's going to show that it's in collections. So now your account's going to have two things. It's going to have a charge-off and it's going to have collections. From the charge-off date, it's going to be on your report for 7.5 years. Now, each year it's going to have less of an impact on your score, but it will show up for 7.5 years. The collection account's a little different. It's going to be on your account for 7 years from the date of your initial missed payment. So that 30-day payment that you were late on, it's going to be 7 years from that date. Now, collection agencies a lot of times will make a mistake and it'll try to report it beyond that 7 years. They'll claim it's when they bought it, and that's when they'll start the 7-year period. That's not the date. The date is that 30-day period when you missed the first payment, 7 years from there. So when you're looking at your credit report, make sure you go through it very carefully to make sure that you agree with all the debts and that they're correct, but also with those dates, because the dates are very important. The older you can make it, the better, because an aged collection is going to look a lot better than a fresh one. And after that period is passed, you want to get it off the account. Now that should come off automatically after 7.5 or a 7-year period, depending what it is. But it doesn't always because of the way these people report it. So make sure they're reporting the right times and dates. If they're not, you can follow up with first you file it with the credit agencies to say this is an error and here's my proof. And if that doesn't work, usually you should follow up with a state attorney general and they're more than happy to help you. Usually you can just write an email to them and show the documentation and they'll be right on it, and that will get removed very quickly because once the state gets involved, you find a very good advocate there. But let's assume that you do have some negative reports, and how should you address of getting rid of these? Well, the easiest is simply to call the credit card company. Let's assume that you've always been a very good customer and that for whatever reason, you moved or you just missed one payment in the last 3 years. Simply call the credit card company and say you're trying to improve your credit. It looks like you made a mistake a couple years ago or a year ago. Other than that one time, you've always been really good, and just ask them to remove the negative report from your credit. You'll be surprised the number of times they will. You won't have to pay them or do anything. You just have to ask and they'll do it. Now, if you don't have any success on the phone, I suggest what you do is write a Goodwill Letter. You can do an internet search for a template for a Goodwill Letter, but put it in your own personal words. And tell them, I'm trying to improve my credit, and here's the reason that I missed that 1 or 2 payments that's now showing up on my credit report, and it's really hurting me. Tell them how you've always been a good customer. Obviously, the only way this is going to work is if you have been a good customer and you are current. I don't think the credit card companies are going to be very forgiving if you still owe them a debt and you're behind with getting rid of that reporting. Usually this is going to happen if it's a year or more and you've been very good since. The next thing you're going to do is called a pay for deletion letter. And in this case, what you're going to do is you're going to call the collection agencies and you're going to see if they're willing to settle the debt. But you're not just going to send a check. What you're going to do is say, if I agree to make a payment on this debt, will you stop reporting this negative information to the credit agencies? Now, one misleading part about this is even if they agree with you to do that, that doesn't mean that the credit agencies will take it off your report. So there's a bit of a risk that it remains on your report even if you get this agreement with the collection agency. And it's very important to get all this in writing before you send a dime. The other thing to understand when you're dealing with collection agencies is there's a thing called statute of limitations. So what's important to know is just because something's on your credit report doesn't mean they can sue you. Your debt is only going to be a debt that the states will recognize and force you to pay through courts for a certain period of time. Sometimes it's 2 years, sometimes it can be 7 years, sometimes it can be more. It all depends on your state and the type of debt. But let's assume your state is credit card debt is 3 years. Collection agencies will still buy debt that's over 3 years old, even though they can't bring you to court and win on it, because they know that they can still report this amount for another 4 years and that you're likely to want to pay off the debt. That's exactly what they want, and that's why they're in business. But just remember, if you're within that 3-year period, they can sue you and they can bring you to court, and then they could have a lawsuit with a settlement against you, a judgment against you that's going to show up in your credit report, and that's very damaging. So make sure that if it is within that statute of limitations, that you treat it differently than if it's outside the statute of limitations, just because there's that much more of a risk that could hit your credit score. So those are the major ways that you can address any items that are showing up on your credit report. If you have any questions, please ask it below and we'd be happy to address it. See you next time.